love the idea of geeky panties. I have a healthy collection for this reason, but in my experience, geeky panties don't tend to result in very well-made or comfy panties, like this Superman pair that has no elastic around the leg holes, and the logo is getting stretched and cracked out because underwear is stretchy, duh! Then I have this Batman pair as well that at least the logo is actually in the fabric so it stretches well, but again, there's no elastic around the leg holes so it's not very comfy at all. I want a pair of geeky underwear that is super comfy and pretty, like this pair, which isn't geeky. So this week, I'm going to show you how to make super comfy, pretty underwear. And then next week, we're going to make them geeky. For this week, here's what you need. Sewing pins, skizzers, washable marker and/or tailor's chalk, some large pieces of paper to draw your pattern on, some stretch lace, a sewing machine with matching thread, and about a half a yard of stretch knit fabric. Let's have a quick talk about that. The fabric I'm holding right now is kind of ideal for making underwear. It's 90% cotton, so it breathes with you well, and it stretches in both directions, so both across the grain and with the grain. This stuff is great, however, not the easiest to find, especially not in Joann's. You're much more likely to find this stuff, which is 100% polyester two-way stretch knit. Sometimes they'll have spandex. If it does, that's even better. If it doesn't, it can still work. If you do get 100% polyester, make sure you buy at least a quarter of a yard of 100% cotton knit as well. No matter what kind of fabric you get, it's important to measure how much it stretches. Take 2 pins, put them 1 inch apart, and then stretch the 2 pins as far apart as they will go, writing down how much it stretches. Make sure you do this widthwise or against the grain, and then do it again in the opposite way, so with the grain. This is really important because underwear is a very stretchy material that fits very close to your body. You have to adjust the pattern if your stretch is different between your fabric and your underwear. The last item you need is your favorite pair of underwear. Make sure you check the stretch on that too, writing down both how much it stretches widthwise and how much it stretches heightwise. We're working with our favorite pair of underwear because let's face it, if you're going to bother to make yourself a pair of underwear, it better be a pair you actually like to wear. Now take your large piece of paper and fold it in half lengthwise. Then take out your favorite pair of underwear again, fold it in half as flat as you can possibly get it, and line up the edge of the fold with the edge of the fold in the paper. Trace around the outside of it. Now, the back and the front are going to be different sizes, so you're going to have to trace the entire back, and then take out a new piece of paper with a fold and trace the entire front. I do this by just lifting it up and kind of following along it as carefully as you can. Then square off the crotch as best you can on both pieces. For both the front and the back, measure and write down the widest point of the underwear and the tallest point of the underwear. Now take out a piece of paper. Write down the width stretch of the garment you want to make over the stretch of the fabric you're working with to get a ratio that you want to remember for later. Repeat those same steps for the height. Now take the widest point measurement and multiply it by the ratio that you got before. Feel free to round up if it's close and if it makes it easier. Repeat those same steps for the height. Again, round up if it makes it easy and if it's really close. Take your new width number and subtract it by the original width to get how much you have to add. Repeat the same for the height. Take how much you have to add and divide it by 2 to get how much you have to add to each of the sides. So I have to add 1¼ inches on 2 sides and 0.625 on the top and the bottom. Across every side except the fold, just go ahead and add your height and your width in. It's exactly what it sounds like. The only place it gets tricky is around the curve because, well, it's a curve. So what you want to do is add the height in the upper part of the curve where most of it is facing that direction, and add the width at the bottom part of the curve around the crotch. Start heading towards the middle in that way, and eventually when you get close, just kind of freehand it until it looks right. Now take out your stretch lace and measure across. Mine is 1¼ inch. Then take that number and minus 1/4 inch. That new number, which for me is 1 inch, I mark in on all sides where there's going to be stretch lace, which is the top and the leg hole. Then from there, I mark a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the crotch seam and at the side seam. Make sure the final marks you need are nice and obvious from all the other marks you probably have on your paper, and then go ahead and cut your pattern out. Cut each pattern down the fold line and attach a rectangle to one side that is the width of how much you have to add. So for me, it's 2½ inches. not divided in half. Then go ahead and line up the bottom of the crotches so that they're touching and the top so that it hits the edge of that rectangle. So there's the total addition at the top, but almost no addition around the crotch. Make sure you do the same for the front and the back. Now take out your front and trace out around the crotch about 4 or 5 inches up. This is going to be your crotch liner, and again, if you're working with polyester, that piece needs to be made out of 100% cotton stretch knit. Don't forget to add a 1/2 inch of seam allowance on the top. Cut out all your pieces, being sure that the grain is going down the length of the underwear. Then put the front and the back right sides together and pin and sew the side seams with a zigzag stitch. Take out your crotch liner and pin and sew down the 1/2 inch of seam allowance on the top of the piece. Taking your underwear back, put it wrong side out, flip it over, put the crotch piece onto the back of the underwear, wrong side facing up, and pin and sew all 3 pieces together. Flip the crotch piece so that it goes in the front and pin it in place. Taking a washable marker, go ahead and mark a 1/4 inch in on both leg holes and the waist. Now, going back to your favorite pair of underwear, measure how much stretch lace is around the waist and how much is around each of the leg holes. Write all those numbers down. Add a 1/2 inch to each of those numbers and cut out your 3 lengths of stretch lace. Then mark a 1/2 inch in on one end of each of the 3 loops. Overlap the 2 ends that much, making sure there are no twists. Pin and sew the 2 raw edges down with a zigzag stitch. It should look something like this when you're done. Then start pinning on the stretch lace to the underwear, lining up one edge of the stretch lace with the 1/4 inch in mark that we did earlier. Now your stretch lace is probably either going to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than the loop that you're pinning it onto. The way we deal with this is to evenly pin any excess fabric around the whole length and then stretch it out while you're sewing so that it's flat. Try to sew it on with a zigzag stitch that's about a 1/4 inch wide. Attach all your stretch lace loops, being sure that you sew the crotch liner in place. Then you're done. You've made plain functional underwear. Wait till you see what I do next week.